זבת חלב, ארץ זבת חלב, ארץ זבת חלב, חלב ודבש.
Shalom everyone. This Torah song, what is it all about? And what about the Ten Commandments? And Shavuot, what is the story behind the story? And what is the story about the tradition? So there, the Israelites are in the desert. It's about 3,300 years ago. They're sitting around Mount Sinai because Moses went up the mountain to bring them the blessings of God. Well, they couldn't wait any longer, and they asked Aaron to build them the golden calf. Something to pray for, something to pray to. Well, Moses was coming down. God and Moses saw the trouble, and Moses, with anger, just threw the 2 tablets down. Well, after lots of forgiving, Moses was able to go back up to the mountain and write the Torah all over and bring down the 10 Commandments. When Moses was about to bring them down, the mountain was surrounded with flowers. That humble, deserty mountain had flowers blossoming, and birds were chirping, and thunder and lightning as Moses was coming down with the commandments. And the Israelites were waiting down below. All Israelites, men, women, children, old and young, everybody was there to receive the Torah, which includes the 10 Commandments, of course. And the children were dancing, and the women were dancing, and the men were dancing with joy of receiving the Torah. Hence, every year, at this time, we're receiving the Torah all over again. So it takes place 7 weeks after Passover. From the second day of Passover, we count 7 weeks. 7 becomes a very important number in our tradition. 7 days of the week, and 7 weeks between the second day of Pesach to Shavuot. Right behind me, there's another symbol, the symbol of the land of Israel. 7 species that the land was blessed with. So we are going to talk about the different symbols and the different practices of Shavuot and why we celebrate it. So let's recap. The Torah tells us about 3 major festivals. She talks about the festival of Passover, which originally was the New Year, where the people became free. For 7 weeks they were free. And then on the completion of the 7th week, they received the book of laws. And then they marched additionally in the desert for 40 more years till a generation came through which was able to go into the land. And the commandment was, once you get into the land, you will follow the rule of coming up to the temple 3 times a year. And these are the 3 times. You would come in on Pesach, you would come in on Shavuot, and you will come in on Sukkot, commemorating the journey of the Israelites in the desert. Those are the 3 major festivals. And we know so because the Torah says, "Velakachta mereshit kol pri adama asher tavim me'artzecha ושמת בתנה והלכת אל מקום אשר יבחר האלוהים לשכן שמו שם." Doesn't say where the temple will be, but it said that you should pick up the fruit, the first fruit, from the land and bring it up to the temple wherever God will decide to dwell. The fruits of the Holy Land. Hence, all these different names and connotation that comes with the festival of Shavuot. Let's enumerate the names of the holiday. So the festival has 5 names, so befitting this festival, this holiday that has so much meaning to it. The first one is Shavuot, which relates to the 7 weeks between Passover and Shavuot. Shavuot is a week, 7 weeks, Shavuot. It also means a promise, an oath. We promise God that we will follow His rules, and in turn He would take care of us. The same for me, Bat-Sheva. Yes, it's 7, but it's also a promise that I will continue to do the best I can. Shavua, Shavua, Shavuot. But that name. The next name is Chag Matan Torah, of course. It's the holiday that we received the Torah. And that's all it is, all the celebration. As we start to pray, as we start to study, as we celebrate the receiving of the book of laws, the book of the Torah. The third name is Chag HaBikurim. We are commended to bring offering to God. The offerings are of our first fruits of the season. At this time, in the Holy Land, the fruits were just coming up. The new vegetables, the new olives, all just coming out, and they would be brought to the temple, as we said, at this time, because we were commended to bring it to the temple. As it is said, ולקחת מראשית כל פרי האדמה אשר תביא מארצך, ושמת בטנא, והלכת אל המקום אשר יבחר אדוני אלוהיך לשכון שמו שם. So wherever God had chosen to bring the gifts to him, that would be the place. That will be the place to worship and share the fruits of the land. The fourth name is Chag HaKatzir. It is the time that we were collecting the wheat and the barley from the fields. They were ready, they were planted before Passover and ready to be picked up at this time, as we were counting the 7 omers, the 7 shefts of wheat during the 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot. So we call it Chag HaKatzir. This is the time that we cut down the wheat and barley. Chag HaKatzir. And the last name, the fifth name, is Chag Atzeret, simply Atzeret, which means to stop and congregate, to get together and celebrate this beautiful time of the year, where we can pause and accept the tradition. 5 names for Shavuot. So how do we celebrate the holiday? How do we celebrate this festival? What do we follow? But for me, it is important because of the land, the homeland. In Israel, we celebrate only one day because we have to rush back to the fields. But in the diaspora, luckily, we celebrate it for 2 days, including the Iskar saying on the second day, the commemoration prayers. So for me, the blessings of the festival winds up with the 7 species. We have the grapes, the barley, the wheat, the fig, the olives, the pomegranates, and the dates. So meaningful to me. We celebrate with the fruits, we celebrate with the flowers, we celebrate with the wheat. But this celebration continues. We know that the mountain was covered with flowers, hence we decorate ourselves, we decorate our synagogues, we decorate our homes with flowers to enhance the celebration. Today we don't have a holy temple, we don't have the opportunity to bring new shefts of wheat and new vegetables, bikurim, to the temple. We don't have that. Actually, in Israel, sometimes you will watch reenactments of this particular festival. As I was a little girl, we would also reenact it in Israel. We would wear flowers in our hats and whites to get ourselves all ready for receiving the Torah and giving the fruits to the temple. This continues till today. So Shavuot, with all its glory, we have to remember the ways, the traditional ways to celebrate. Of course, we light the candles before the holiday on the first night and on the second night. We light them with a blessing for the festivals. And then we stay up. The eve of the holiday, we stay up all night to study Torah. Why is that? Why do we have to study Torah all night? Simply because when the Israelites were actually preparing to receive the Torah, they slept all night. They slept so they will have the strength for the next day. Well, God was really upset about that. That's what the tradition says. So to avoid any rest, or to avoid us from falling asleep, we study Torah all night in preparation of receiving the Ten Commandments. And then in the morning, when we get to temple, we must listen to the reading of the Ten Commandments. Do you guys know the Ten Commandments? We have a little bit of a Ten Commandment replica over here. Those Ten Commandments must be read and must be heard. And it says, I am your God, I'm the Lord. There should be no other God to you. Don't use my name in vain. Remember the Shabbat. Remember to honor your parents. Don't kill, of course. Don't be jealous of anyone. Don't steal. Don't abuse anyone. And don't cherish somebody else's wife. Those rules are really important. And the commandment is for us to listen, no matter how old we are, to listen to the reading of the Ten Commandments every time, every year on Shavuot. What else we do? We need to eat dairy. And why dairy? Well, our sages said, since the rules of kashrut were not written yet, and the Israelites did not have the proper preparation, so they just ate dairy and vegetarian dishes. So in celebration of that, and traditionally, we eat dairy dishes on Shavuot. But it's also a tradition to eat two meals, a traditional dairy meal and wait the hours that needed, and in the evening have a meat meal, since we already have the rules and we know the preparation that is needed for kosher foods. What else we have to do? We have to do on the second day, we have to remember the people that are no longer with us. And this is to commemorate also King David. It is said that King David passed away on Shavuot. That's his Yortzeit. So not just our dear ones we commemorate and remember King David, who built Jerusalem for us. He wasn't the one who built the temple first, but he was the one who moved the Ark of Covenant with the Ten Commandments into the city of Jerusalem, the new built city with the Mishkan. What else we have to do? We have to do something very important. I think it's important to remember the story of Ruth. On the first day in the synagogues, we read the story of Ruth. The book of Ruth, the scroll of Ruth, Megillat Ruth, speaks of the times. It took place 500 years BCE, just at the time of the judges. There were no kingdoms yet in Judea. There were no kings yet, pre-King David. So the situation, as usual, this prominent family who lived in Judea leaves the Holy Land for another place, a better place where there's plenty of food and plenty of water. There was a drought, as usual, in Israel. They went to Moab. They got closer to the king of Moab, King Eglon, and they went down with their two sons, and King Eglon had two daughters, and they made up a shidduch. The shidduch, the problem was that, of course, the children, the daughters of King Eglon, were not Jewish. And there is a story of interfaith and intermarriage. Fine, acceptable for those people at that time. There was not much of a problem. These women and their households, the two brothers and the two sisters. But the problems came along. The two young men passed away, and soon after that, Elimelech passed away as well. Ruth was the beloved daughter-in-law. Her sister, Orpah, was the second daughter-in-law. Naomi was homesick. She wanted to go back to Judea, back to the Holy Land. So she packed up and she was telling her daughter-in-laws that it's time for her to go back. Well, her daughter-in-law Ruth would not let her go home, back to the Holy Land by herself. She continued to walk with her. And Naomi tried to discourage her, told her not to continue. But Naomi did not succeed. Ruth said to her, "Wherever you go, I shall go. Your people are my people." We know and we understand that Ruth accepted the Jewish laws and became a Jewess. This is the first story, truly, in the Torah about some kind of a conversion, some kind of an acceptance. And the story continues. When they arrived in the Holy Land, in Bethlehem, the city was surrounded by fields, and it was this time of the year, in springtime, where the wheat was collected and the barley was collected, and the poor two women had to step in to collect the leftover wheat to glean the fields. Well, Naomi was way too old for that, and Ruth did the job. She was gleaning with the girls, the people, the poor people who needed to glean and get wheat and barley that way so they can make bread and challah. A sad situation, but humbled Ruth, who accepted our Jewish tradition, continued. She was so modest. Everyone would bend down to pick up the wheat. Ruth was lowering herself. She did not pick up her skirt. She was this modest, royal little girl. She wasn't a little girl anymore. At that time, she was a 40-year-old widow. The owner of the fields was Boaz. Boaz liked Ruth, but he wasn't sure who she was. Once he found out who she was, as a relation, he had to clear her name and see if he can marry her. On the other hand, Naomi, her mother-in-law, kept pushing her towards Boaz because she saw salvation. She saw the future. He's a wealthy man. He will help them out. So Naomi asked Ruth one night to go to Boaz and share the evening with him. We're not so sure what the sharing of the evening meant and what was the outcome. But the next day, once Boaz cleared her name so she could be married to him, he married her. At that point, he was 80 years old, according to tradition, and Ruth was 40. What a joy. Ruth became pregnant. But traditionally we know that Boaz never saw that child. He died the night after the wedding. And Ruth and Naomi raised this princely baby, this child that became the grandfather of King David. And hence the connection between Ruth and the kingdom of David. The time of the kings came from this humble woman who helped her mother-in-law, who crossed from one country to the next with love for her family, with devotion and perseverance to do the best she can. Ruth is a heroine in many, many places, on many, many lips. Ruth, which actually is from the root re'ut. Re'ut is friendship. It's deep love and friendship. And this is what the festival is all about. Celebrating friendship, celebrating our friendship, our relationship with God, celebrating the earth, celebrating nature and all that we have, with flowers and good foods and happy times. Chag Matan Torah, when we receive the Torah, Chag HaBikurim, and Chag Shavuot. Chag Shavuot Sameach, and this is why we celebrate Shavuot. Chag Sameach.